Hello and welcome to the last episode of the short series Conscious Living and Conscious Dying. I'm Heidi Hörnlein from the wisdomfactory.net, and I created this series because my co-host and husband died 4 months ago, about 4 months ago. And creating this series for me is a way to deal with the grief. And I'm very grateful that many people came to help me with that and share their experience. We had a session, the first session, about surviving cancer. The second one was about being there with a family member when they are dying, and it was in German. And the same topic, the third session, was in English, the same thing, being there with a family member. Then last week we had a session with professional hospice workers. And today we want to talk about that, what has happened to us, that our life partner died. In addition, there are 3 recordings in our website. You can find the program and also, here it is, the program and also these recordings under bit.ly/WF with big letters and then program. These recordings are one in English and one in German, Living on the Edge, how to live with a long time serious illness and what you can do to heal yourself. And the other one is the most, let's say, most intimate for me. It is with the daughter of Mark. Mark is my husband who died. And the husband of his first daughter, the other daughter, actually is the second daughter, she died 5 years ago of cancer. And since then, death and dying was very present in our conversations. So now let's go to our guests. We have guests of 3 different countries, from Sweden, from England, and from USA. And let's start in Europe. Let's start with Jane to present yourself.
Hi, hello. Yes, actually, so I'm not from England, I'm from Scotland.
Yeah, excuse me.
That's okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to anybody else except us, probably. Yeah. My name is Jane Duncan Rogers, and yes, now you know I'm based in the north of Scotland, the very far north. I run Before I Go Solutions, which is a not-for-profit organisation that helps people to make good end-of-life plans. We also I teach the Before I Go method, which is a way of actually getting your plans done. And I also run the Before I Go Academy, which is teaching other people, usually coaches, consultants, counsellors or celebrants, to bring the Before I Go method to their own locality. But 8 years ago, when my husband was first diagnosed with cancer, I could never, in my wildest imaginings, thought I would be doing anything like this. And so, but that's a very brief thing just to say, and I guess I'll talk a little bit more maybe about that later on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So now let's go to Sweden.
Hello, my name is Henrik Bradmark, and I live in Stockholm, Sweden. And in my profession, I work as a social worker, and I've been working in healthcare many years ago. And I'm also very much interested in integral theory and healthcare. So, I lost my girlfriend. It's now a little bit more than 1.5 years, so almost 2 years ago. And I also lost my mother the same year, and my cat. So it was a tough year, but I'm interested in how we best cope with these questions of dying and healing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it was a tough year for you. And in another session came up also the question of accompanying a cat in their death process. And I think it is not to be undervalued how much, it can be at your heart to lose an animal and to be with them and see them decay. And I have lived that too several times. So I can feel with you also in that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to America. First, Texas. Christine? Yeah.
Hi. My name is Kristen Van Tilburg. I am a mindset strategist and a consultant for people who are working through burnout. And I lost my partner 20 months ago, pretty unexpectedly, and have had quite a journey through grief. But it has amplified and enriched my life in ways that I never would have expected, and can feel gratitude now for the time that we had together and for the time that I've spent alone since he left.
Yeah, thank you. We will go into that later too. And Lynn? I can unmute you. Now you're unmuted.
Hi, I'm Lynn Feldman. I live in Upper Saddle River, New Jersey, which is 45 minutes away from New York City if there's no traffic, and days if there's traffic. So, and I'm joined by Chloe, who is a Maltipoo, and she is my official emotional support animal. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. They've made fun of people who've had peacocks and pigs, but she has been an emotional support animal to me. She's 10 and a half years old, and I don't know what I do when she passes away. She's so much a part of my heart. I wound up unexpectedly, as happens, with 2 separate cancers at the same time. I was diagnosed with both breast and lung cancer, and I've never smoked. And I had a very, very, very rough 18 months. My oncologist said to me, "My God, Lynn, you've been through hell." And for an oncologist to say that to you, it was pretty awful. I became very worried about dying from cancer because I had heard so many horrible stories. So I wound up training with the top end-of-life doula program, which I really would like to speak about, associated with Valley Hospital in Paramus, New Jersey. It's the best in the country. And I sat with the dying. I took a year-long course with them and sat with the dying and actually saw what it was like, so that I understood what the process was, what can happen, and how making life plans and carrying them out so that their wishes were respected. My husband of 44 years fell in 2014. First, he broke his knee. Then a month later, he broke his hip. He became suicidal because he was in so much pain, and he was a type A pilot and not used to being disabled. And I was constantly having to deal with his suicidal impulses. He seemed to be healing emotionally as well as physically. I went away to my son-in-law is Scottish as well, and we went to a family wedding, all of us, in Glasgow. And my husband's back was hurting, so he didn't come. He was fine. He was going to go flying that weekend with his friends. I spoke to him Saturday, August 20th at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we were joking about the funny hat that I had to wear to the wedding and how we were going to Phoenix when I got home. And his daughter from his first marriage was staying with him to keep him company. And 3 hours later, she called me and said he was dead. He had a brainstem aneurysm that nobody knew he had. So I was an ocean away and had to fly home. And because we're Jewish, had to prepare an immediate funeral. And I wound up in shock for 6 months.
Yeah. So as you begin to talk about the circumstances, I think we could start talking about the circumstances, how we lost our partner, and then maybe later how we went through it afterwards, you know. Do you want to, you are on picture, Jane, do you want to continue?
Sure. Yeah. My husband Philip yes, it was a shock, but it shouldn't in theory have been a shock, because he was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and initially we were given a fairly good prognosis if the operation that he had to have would get rid of all the cancer. So to start with, we were living in what I would now look back and say was a bit of a bubble of 6 months of him having chemo and then living with cancer and learning how to be with it. And actually he experienced some of the best health he's ever had in that time, which was a bit odd. But he did have the operation and it didn't get everything out. And so at that point, we then knew that we were facing the end sooner than later. And that did happen about 8 months later. We had talked to some degree about the sorts of things that he might want, but we'd only done that in response to 3 emails, insistent emails from a friend of ours saying, with a long list of questions, saying that you must get Philip to answer these before he goes. And neither of us were very happy about that, but we did do it. And actually, these were very practical questions to do with how it would be after he had died. And we did do that. And it was in the most intimate and incredible connection that morning. It's such a good memory to have. And so surprising. We had been talking about his death, but actually it brought us really close and much more alive together. But one of those things was that he wanted to die at home. But as it turned out, he was taken into hospital for various different reasons, and we didn't begin to imagine that he wouldn't come home again, but that is what happened. And by the time he was willing to accept that he actually was dying, he was too ill to be moved, and so he died in the hospital. I was there by the bedside along with 2 other friends as well. His breathing had been laboured, I would say, for a day or 2, and then he was shifted in the bed by the nurses to make him more comfortable. He was apparently sleeping at this stage. I think he was sleeping. And very soon after they shifted his position, his breathing started to change to be just one breath and then a long gap. Now, I had read about this, so I knew to expect this. I knew it could go on for a long time, but I was really surprised when after 10 minutes there was no other breath. Yeah, it was what I found. I have not heard anybody else talk about it like this, but I found that I could not look at his body. As soon as he had passed, and I could tell by a shift of colour in his face, very, very subtle. But once that had happened, I couldn't look at his body anymore because it wasn't him. And I'd been talking to him about angels and comforting words, as what I thought. And I had to look up at the ceiling and keep on talking there, because this empty bag that I was looking at wasn't him. It just wasn't him. And that was quite an intense experience, because I lost all interest in the body at that point. And I know that doesn't actually happen for most people, but it did happen for me. So, yeah, but that experience was paramount in what I then went through for the next probably couple of years, and I eventually wrote about it, and I really identified with Kristen there about the gratitude and the gifts, which at the time, of course, I only knew that in theory. In practice, it took a bit of time before that came to be that I could be grateful for both his life and his death. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the moment. We will go into that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So, Heinrich?
Well, I know where to start, really. I think I'll start with my girlfriend. She was cared for at home by a hospice staff, and she was getting sicker. So I was worried that she would not. She needed more adjusted pain treatment. She was suffering from neuropathy. How do you say this? Neuropathy. It's like damaged nerve from. You can either get it from chemotherapy or from the tumor itself, and she was suffering with from metastasized cancer in her body. So we were very anxious about the treatment of the pain, and that was the painkillers at home. They didn't do the trick, so to speak. So we got help at and we decided that she was going to move to the hospice nearby, and well, when we got there, we talked to the doctor, and he said, "Oh, it's good that she's here now, and she's very tired, and we need to put some regulate the pain." And so me and her sister, we were anxious, like if we could leave her for a moment to get her things, and the doctor said that's normal. Go and get all the stuff she needs. And when we did that, and we also had something to eat, we knew we had to sit for a long time afterwards. But when we got back, they said you have to be prepared. She might not have very long time left, and that was quite a shock. I was not really prepared for that quick change. I was sort of prepared, like it was a question of time that could happen, but not that fast. So that was very, very shocking. And when we got there, she also had a great friend who was there while we were away, and she was singing to her, which was very comforting that she hadn't been alone while we were away. But when we got back, I was very shocked that it was so short time left. But I was very comforted that I got the chance to sit by her side, and that we were gathered around her in support. And that was the most important thing for me, to be supportive in that moment at the best of my ability. And I guess that's the most important thing. And I also was not so afraid because of different. She was very. How do you say? She was not afraid, and because she was not afraid, I got. I felt calm because she was talking about coming home, and because of that faith she had, I felt relaxed that she was approaching the bardos in a way that she might feel strengthened about, and I could only assist in that. And after a time, I felt her presence all the time, although during that moment. But after a time, we also asked the staff if we could go and get the cats when she had passed away. So we got one person, her friend stayed. No, I got this wrong. It was her sister stayed, and her friend and we went to got the cats and went back. And so the cats could say goodbye. That was very important. That the cats could say goodbye, and because it felt like she was present still in the room, though she had, and so it was important for me for the cats to be there. I went also back the next day, because you could do that, to sit before you have some time before they to sit with the person who have died. And for me, it was important because I read in the Preparing to Die and also the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Like, I was very keen on supporting the journey through the bardos from this life to next life, or whatever is hereafter in this life. And since the subtle body is still in the room, speaking integral lingo, or the soul, it's very important not to just regard the body just as a physical body, but as the soul is present. So, and if you just disregard the presence of the soul, you will not support the person on the most difficult journey ever. So, and that was something that was, and I felt very honored about having this chance of trying to be of support in that moment. And yes. It was, yes.
Okay.
That was I'll come up with something more later, maybe.
Yeah. How did she die? How were you there in the moment when she died? How?
Yes, when my girlfriend died, I was there. So it was very. She was very sedated and of the pain medication, and I think she relaxed very much in the body, and the body was very. The body has been struggling for so long time, and it finally sighed its side to rest, I would say. But we were taken care of very nicely by the staff, and we had a conversation with the counselor and the physician afterwards, and the nurses and everyone. So it was very gentle moment. And before that, during her sickness and illness, I was also we were reading a lot of things, and I was reading. I'm actually very glad that Lynn Fieldman is on this call, because I was reading her book, Integral Healing, and that was a very big support for me to sort of help my girlfriend in her, to know where I was and what she was going through, and also might be going through, and also in conversations with doctors and so on, even like how the relationship with the doctors changes through what's happening. But then when my mother died the same year later, I was not present. It was my brother who was present. I was at work, and that was a horrible situation when you're not there when it happens. That's terrible. But then I was there afterwards, and I was singing from the Bible some chorus songs that are related to supporting the journey through death, and I was trying to honor the belief of my mother and the belief of my girlfriend in picking the spiritual material.
Wonderful. Wonderful, really. And Christine?
Well, my sweetheart had some illness, but I wasn't prepared for what happened. We had a really wonderful day. We had gone out to breakfast, and then we had made a trip into the country, and then we had pizza for dinner, which was one of his favorite meals, even though he was a wonderful cook. And we were watching television, and something started happening, and I knew that something serious was happening, probably a heart attack, and I called but I live in a rural area, and it took them about 20 minutes to arrive. And by the time they got there, he was gone. So my reaction was similar, that I didn't feel moved to be with his body. I felt that he had moved into a different dimension of awareness and that his body was empty. I've read a book by Ken Wilber called From Grace to Grit, I forget which it is, but it's about the death of his wife. And he talks about supporting her body after she left it. So I was aware of that, but I didn't feel a personal call in that regard. I really wanted to remember him alive. I didn't want my memories of him to be in death. So I didn't stay with the body after he died. It was such a numbing, shocking experience. It was nothing like you see on television. I remember feeling so angry about that. The television kind of prepares you for, in your mind, you know, you have an idea about dying, and it just wasn't like that. Of course, he wasn't medicated, and this was just a real violent separating of the soul from the body. I mean, I assume that's what was happening. I don't know, but it was quite difficult to deal with that physical part. I feel like I had some traumatic stress to deal with just because of seeing that. And it wasn't medicated, and it wasn't peaceful, and it wasn't a quiet slipping away. There was this real wrestling. Although I did have an insight, and I'll share this. I have no idea what his experience was. But if I had been in a hotel and I had been hearing these noises on the other side of the wall, it could have been an orgasm. It was loud noises like that. And I'm hoping that maybe in the reality where he was, where his consciousness was, that there was something orgasmic and expansive and opening that because I was interpreting the physical experience, I didn't see that. But it did come to me maybe 6 weeks later that what I had interpreted as violent and painful and suffering, that there might have actually been an aspect that was blissful and ecstatic and expansive. So I share that in hopes that might touch someone that would needed that perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I invited you all to inspire people that there are so many different ways of going towards the end, and that's not only horrible, but I was struck what you said, Henrik, that it is horrible not to be there when your mother died. Most people today would say it's horrible to be there, you know? And so that's exactly the intention of this series, to take away the fear of being with people who are going. And also interesting, the different relationships to the physical body after people have died. So now I want to share what happened to me. And Mark was diagnosed of cancer in mid of April. And, you know, at the beginning, you think you can do something and whatever. And he had the first chemotherapy in the beginning of June. And then it didn't really work. He needed to have oxygen because he had lung cancer. And it was difficult for me because I'm not a health professional. And so I more or less had to invent myself what I needed to do with him, you know. And he had metastasis and the pain and how to act and react. But it was clear for us that he wouldn't go into the hospital, not in the Italian hospital, really not. And so then slowly the idea came that would be the last journey. We were talking about it, and in the last, let's say, 2-3 weeks, he was more and more silent. I knew that he was sort of inside. His eyes were becoming very clear, or very, I don't know how to say that, very open, and he observed me. He hardly could, you know, move a lot because with the oxygen thing around. So, And then he always thought and hoped that he would be there when he died, because for him life had become an adventure, an experience. And actually he was there when he died. We had outside under a roof, under a terrace, an open space where there was a couch, and every day when it was nice weather, I accompanied him out, and people came and to visit him. And in this day there was a friend of ours who had a brother almost dying, and he talked about that, we talked about that, and then Mark said, my brother had emphysema and nobody wanted to talk with him about dying. So once I asked him, do you fear dying? And he said, no, I don't fear dying, but I fear to run out of breath. And now I am in the same situation. And then he had about 20 minutes later or so, a very severe breathlessness attack, and I embraced him and tried to help him and calm him. And then he just fell over, 2 or 3 breaths, and he was dead. In some way unexpected, because his situation as it was could have gone on for months still. And he saved himself. That's what my interpretation is. And also to me, the worst thing which can happen when you are attached and lying on the bed, when you are attached to all these, you know, if you cannot get up anymore to do pee and stuff like this. So yeah, and so he was present, and then we took him into the bedroom, and he could stay here thanks to a air conditioner which I had just installed 3 days before. He could stay home for 3 days, and then he was taken to the graveyard. And we had a nice celebration. We invited all the friends for breakfast, and it was really good. Not church. We did a ceremony between each other, because Mark definitely was not religious in any sense. But there was a belief in something greater than us. And as the relationship to the body, the first night I slept nearby, but then I couldn't. It was too cold. It was strange then. And I still talked to him, but I noticed the 3 days he was at home that often I talked only through the door. And I hardly entered into, and, you know, only short, saying hello and going back again, because it was strange. I was not sure if he was still there. And even now, when I go to the graveyard, I say hello, but to the body, but not sure what I think where he is. And that might seem very, very, very strange to many people. We had a preferred walk into the archaeological park down to the Tiber River. And since he died, I almost all the time I go there, and I go there 3-4 times a week. There is a big crane on the other side of the river. And for me, this big crane, big bird, I don't know how you call that. I think that's him. It's his soul messenger. And so I talked to that one. It's a little bit far away, maybe 50 meters or 60, 70 meters, but still quite clear. And I'm always happy when I meet him and I say, hello, Mark. And his cat died 2 months later. And sometimes his cat, in my opinion, is a white bird who is there often, but not always. Well, he is 90% of the times I go down, the crane is there. And the cat was buried on his feet. We did it clandestinely. Nobody should know that, but I don't think it's any problem with that. So the cat was important. And for the cat, losing her protector, because I didn't have a good relationship with her, but Mark had, was hard. And she did what she needed to do. Okay, that's so far the story of the death of Mark. And now I would be interested how you coped with that, how it was for you, the days, the weeks, the months after that experience, and what you talked about a gift, what this gift was, how you developed something out of that.
Did we hear from Lynn yet?
I think. Oh, did we?
I don't think we heard Lynn's story. No,
oh,
we didn't.
I'm sorry. So go ahead.
I have been blessed in my life by being a very close friend of Ken Wilber, studying with him and being on phone calls with him every single day for 3 years. And when I found out that I had breast cancer, I wrote him, and his story of his wife's death, called Grace and Grit, became my Bible. And by the way, they're making a major motion picture out of it as we speak. I forget who plays Treya and who plays Ken. I remember at Integral Institute we used to put our favorites, who would play Ken. I don't remember which actor is, but it is in production right now. So dying was something that was of major concern to me because I thought it would be mine. And just recently, as Heidi knows, on October 1st, I became extremely ill very suddenly. I became septic. I was rushed to the hospital, and the doctors did every test in the world on me, and 8 doctors came to my bedside and said, "You have metastatic breast cancer in both lungs, up and down your spine, and on both hips, and this is pretty much it." I luckily have a wonderful oncologist at a different teaching hospital who said, "I think they're crazy, and you'll have to wait a month for me to do another PET scan." So this past month, I have been again a nervous wreck. They did it last week, and she looked at the PET scan and said, "They're absolutely crazy. There's no cancer anywhere." So my cancer, and I've switched doctors. It's been in my life for so long, death. And then I have to tell you a couple of funny stories. Rick and I had very black sense of gallows humor because so many odd and unhappy things happened to us that unless we turned it into gallows humor, we wouldn't have survived. When he was in perfect health, this alpha male who flew with the United States Coast Guard, decided he was dying. Now, this was before anything was wrong with him, and the doctors kept saying to him, "You're going to live till you're 85. No, Rick said, I'm dying. I'm definitely dying." And I got so sick of it. This was going on month after month. And meanwhile, I'm going through my cancer situation. And I said, I'm sick and tired of this. And I dragged him into my office. And I said, "Okay, we're going to write your eulogy. You're going to write your eulogy. And then I want you to shut up about it. So we'll have your damn eulogy on file. And then I don't want to hear any more about this." So when he passed away and I flew back to the United States, I read the eulogy that he had written. He had a standing room only funeral. I have to tell you a little bit about the Jewish customs. Henrik was talking about it a bit. The Jewish custom is that the body is never left alone. I, of course, was not at the hospital, and I was flying the next day home. So I didn't get, I have to, by New Jersey law, I have to see the body in order to identify it. And when I saw him, of course, he didn't look like himself. It wasn't Rick. And I just kind of said, again, that's a nice shell, nice knowing you, but this is not Rick. And the procedure in Jewish tradition is that they have a group of people who stay with the body and they recite Psalms for 24 hours. The body is washed by these people by hand and dressed in a shroud. We believe in earth to earth, dust to dust. So he was buried in a pine coffin, as is our tradition. that was the tradition. It didn't hit me at all because I hadn't been there. And what upset me a lot was, again, we had standing room only people, and then there's something called sitting Shiva, where you come to the bereaved and you give them food and you sit and you talk and comfort them. Unfortunately, hundreds of people showed up and expected me to serve them. And, you know, I didn't figure this out until I collapsed afterwards. So the Shiva was 3 days, according to tradition. And I was running around serving people and making coffee. And I had just flown back from Scotland. So that was not good at all. I want to tell you a story, because my life and Rick's life is stories. The day that my husband proposed to me in 1969, he told me he had a daughter from his marriage, but he said, I have to tell you, when I was 18, I fell in love with a girl in college and I got her pregnant. And my family was so ashamed of me. You know, in those days, this was a shanda, which is Yiddish for, you know, something terrible happening. And they shipped him off to the army, and she was shipped off to New York to give birth to the baby. He never knew what happened to the baby, but he knew it was a girl. From the day that he proposed until I left for Scotland, he mourned for that child. He wanted that child. Now, in those days, I knew you could find from matrilineal DNA, but I didn't know anything about patrilineal DNA searches. And he grieved. And right before I left for Scotland, he said, do you think that not having this child, this daughter with me, has impacted my life? And I said, yes, because you talk about her all the time. Well, 6 months after he passed away, I received a phone call. His daughter had found him. And that was the time when I broke down. This is something that until right before he died, he grieved to know his daughter. And after, she spent 33 years searching for him. And I had to tell her that she missed her father by 6 months. And I didn't know what to do. So my daughter Erica and I went to the gravesite, looked up to the heavens and screamed, we found her! We found her! We didn't know what else to do. We must have sounded like a bunch of lunatics, but and I also just want to say two things. I was led, while I was going through this cancer scare, I was led to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I was told that for the rest of my life, I must read this Tibetan Book of the Dead, because we all must prepare for our own deaths. And certainly with this latest scare over the month of October, I again have been reading about the Bardos. And the second thing I want to talk about is this end-of-life doula. This is something new, and in the United States, it's taken off. I please want to warn you that there are people out there who've decided this is a new way to make money. They advertise themselves as end-of-life doulas, and they just sit with the person until they die. The program that I am affiliated with at Valley Hospital is the premier program, and here's why. No other program but Valley, and the ones that are based on Valley, provide a continuum from the person's doctor through hiring a doula who is trained for a year and certified as I am, so that if I see that the person is having difficulty, is in distress, I can call the doctor, who will show up immediately or advise a nurse to come to the house and administer more medication. The other services do not have this continuum of care. And my neighbor across the street hired a freelance end-of-life doula, and he screamed in agony till he passed away. So please, please, if you want to check it out with me, private message me, and I'll look into the program. It's rather horrific unless there is a continuum of care from the person's primary doctor through the hospice program and through the doula. So that's just kind of my warning. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry to have overlooked your share.
Yeah.
So let's go into the next question. How was it for you, and how did you find the treasure, and what came out of the treasure? Who wants to start with that?
Okay, I can start, especially as if we go over 7 o'clock. I can only go over for a couple, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. But what happened was that it was about 3 weeks after Philip had died, and I woke up one morning and I thought, if that was an empty bag lying on that hospital bed, then what is this? This is a filled bag. Now, I've been a spiritual seeker all my life. I thought that I knew quite a lot about spirituality and all that. But I went on a mission of finding out what on earth this was filled with, that Philip's body had not been filled with, because it was so clear to me that that was who he was. And therefore, there was something in this body to make it alive that meant that who I was, whatever I was. And those explorations, mostly through the non-dual movement, led me to a place of such utter peace and understanding of being peace itself and being love itself, that that's when I first began to feel grateful of Philip's death. And this was maybe 8 or 9 months or so after he had died. Yeah, I wrote about all this in my book, Gifted by Grief, which I started writing about 2.5 years after he died. Having known that I would always write about it, because I've been a writer, I've been writing a blog, filling pages of my journal was one of my ways of getting through this very difficult time. But I knew that if I waited and didn't try to rush things, I would be clear about when the time was to write about this process. And sure enough, that is what happened. And it was kind of like opening the floodgates, because it all came pouring out. I went back to look at my journals. That was about 18 months maybe after he had died for the first time that I had done that. And what was incredible was that I saw page upon page upon page of anger, of sorrow, of incredibly strong feelings of all kinds, as in amongst all my explorations. And I realized that I didn't feel like that anymore. I didn't have that strength of feeling. And one of the reasons, I think, for that was because I'd been letting it out as I went along, through writing, through crying, through shouting at the heavens, all sorts of things. And a lot of that book, Gifted by Grief, was about the story of where I, let's call them the spiritual explorations that I made. That's not what readers picked up on, though, which I was really surprised by, because for me that was the most important thing. But actually the readers were interested in these questions, and so I mean, a bit like you, Heidi, you know, I followed what life was presenting me with, which was an opportunity to give to people what they were telling me that they wanted, and that's led me to where I am today. In terms of the work that I'm doing, it makes me feel good because I get to talk about Philip a lot. He's still somehow making an impact in the world in this way, and that feels very good to me. Even though my life has moved on, I have met a new partner and we are creating a new life together. he's also a widower, and we both of us feel that our dead spouses are in this relationship with us. It's like a little foursome in a way. I know that sounds really strange, but just in case anybody's listening who's, you know, wondering if they're ever going to meet anybody again. I mean, you know, I for quite a long time I was absolutely not interested, and then there was also quite a long period of time where I felt I couldn't imagine. You know, I was 54 when Philip died, and I couldn't imagine another 30 years without somebody, but I equally as strongly couldn't imagine another 30 years with somebody. How could I possibly replace this man? And you can't replace anyone anyway. So anyway, I ended up, this is a whole other story, but I did come to a place of peace with this, that if I was going to be alone for the rest of my life, that was okay. And I think it was about 2 days later that I met Ian. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent there, but sorry to go off on that one, but that's enough perhaps for me. Otherwise, there's not enough time for everybody else.
And that's wonderful, your share. Thank you very much. Who wants to go next?
Well, I'm really looking forward to reading it. I didn't know about it before, but I'm very anxious to read about it now. You know, one of the difficult things for me about losing Heinz, and we were not married and we did not live together, but we had been together for 7 years in a relationship, and we had a plan for the future for marrying and being together. So I found that losing the physical presence of my beloved, that was a hard thing. And I guess 3, 6, 8 months, I don't know how long, that alone preoccupied my attention. But a time came when I started to realize that his presence wasn't all that was lost to me. There was this identity of being in relationship with him. There was the future that we had planned to create together that was lost. And there was just a tremendous empty place in my life that was always with me. I don't know if you're experiencing that, Heidi, but if you are, my to you, because that's so difficult. It's not just the physical presence of the person, but it's this entire life structure that is so, I mean, you know, I'm a person, and as I said, we weren't married and our finances were separate, and I didn't lose any of that like so many people do. But still, there was this whole structure of my life as in relationship with this person that I lost all of that. And I think that I had to grieve for that as well. Not just this physical presence, but this entire life, this feeling of identity. There was this sense of having to reinvent myself. Heidi, I'm hearing you speak about that now. And you know, there's a wonderful part of that process. And then there's this devastating part of that process where there's an empty place, and an empty place is pregnant with possibility, but there's also nothing there. And that's difficult. You reach into this nothingness and there's nothing. And so where's the gift in that? You know, it's very difficult. And yet,
it's 1 o'clock.
I was sharing with the group that I live out in a rural area, and I have been essentially alone, very alone for 20 months, 90% of my time. I'm by myself. I don't even have a pet. And so there was this empty place, and I began to look into that empty place to find, you know, a way to reinvent myself, if you will. And it was by being willing to ride those waves of grief which were very intense, but I learned that the most painful thing is to resist that, to fight against it, to try to push it away, to try to shield yourself from it. At least for me, maybe other people experience it differently, but for me, that prolonged it and made it more painful. And so if I could just immediately, when this wave would come over, and sometimes it was very unexpected. There was a particular grocery store that he loved to go to, and whenever I went to that grocery store, I would find these waves of grief. So I had to learn to surrender to those. And what I found was that on the other side of a moment of grief, the love was present. The feeling of connection with him was there through the experience of grief. This thought is, the mind says, well, I'm grieving because the body is gone. But what I found was that grief was its own passageway into that reconnection with that experience of being with him. And so now I say that's where I found him, was on the other side of these waves of grief. He's still there. That love, I mean, I don't mean like a body or anything, but the experience of the unity and the connection, that didn't die. That's gone nowhere. That is still available to me. And I feel like that has experience of eternity in the now. As much as a human can have it, that's the profound gift for me. This eternal connection without his physical body, but present in the now.
Thank you. I can relate to that. So we don't want to forget anybody. Henrik first.
Well, I think my feeling was that everything becomes broken, and I had to, like, when you're in the middle of a life and you have this, I can relate to what you were saying, that there was this emptiness, because that's what's happened. Like, when you're in the middle of a life and you have plans for a future together, that togetherness is sort of broken of a common future, or part of the future. But so I had to, and that's a big loss, and takes a very long time to. I don't know how long time it will take, because sometimes it's there, and sometimes you sort of in this reinventing mode and finding your way, your new way in life, and also the fear of sort of being alone or something like that. And but I'm not indulging in and being caught by the fear. I'm trying to, like, notice the fear and let it go. So and also I think I feel the presence back and forth, and like meeting with the grief is like honoring in the life honoring life, and together, and my girlfriend, and well, discovering life time and time again. So it will always be with me. So it cannot be lost in that sense. But sometimes I get worried of when I have thoughts of the future and I would be senile or something like that. That would be scary to lose houses, be with that's fine. But I was also going through, during this time I was with loss, I was going through some hopelessness and fear of future. I was going through meaninglessness of life and trying to rediscover meaning of life. But I was reading Grace and Grit and preparing to die makes life possible and so on. And also was contemplating what my girlfriend was, her belief and, well, spirituality in general. And then I found meaning in in growing and waking up and treasuring life that is my gift of being in the world. And my girlfriend would have, I guess, I mean, she was enjoying life very much, and I got the chance to live, and I would like to honor that and treasure it, as anyone who's struggling with illness is very aware of. So just heighten my awareness of and I guess going through some kind of hero's journey and like rediscovering life again and again, and trying to, well, be with life to its fullest and growing and take seize the day, I guess. But it's hard sometimes and easier other times. But well, but it's also some weird because I don't remember who it was who said something about the non-duality, because that is also some, when I connect with that wisdom, and that also gives me a great relief. So yes, that's me.
Thank you for sharing that. You are the near next to me, I think, or maybe together with Kristin, more or less the same time. Yeah. So Lynn, Jane had to go, but we are still here.
The gift. Okay, I'm an only child. I have no cousins. All of my aunts, uncles, and so forth have passed away. I'm 73, so okay. But I had Rick, and I had been dating Rick since 1968. So I used to tease him that he was like my cousin, you know, that he knew my life history, knew my mother, my father, my dogs, my aunts, my uncles. You know, he knew everybody in my life pretty much. And now I have a daughter and I have a grandson. But all of a sudden, my previous life vanished, I felt, when Rick passed away. Even the other day, I wanted to tell somebody, well, you can ask Rick, what happened 10 years ago. He'll remember. There's nobody who knows me. It's if I vanished when Rick passed away. And that became an existential crisis for me. And I had to go back to a spiritual grounding of who I am and what I am. And I am at peace that it's not the gross contacts that we have, just, a cousin, a sister. I mean, it kills me with jealousy when my friends will go, oh, my cousin and I used to picnic and, remember Sarah when we used to go to grandpa's farm? Oh, we had so much. And it kills me. There's nobody who can do that for me. I had to let that go. I am alone, yet part of the universe, in, again, a very non-dual way. That's the ironic gift from Rick's death, of letting that go and understanding my place in the non-dual and in the spiritual universe.
Thank you also for sharing that. So it's up to me to talk about the gift. It's still difficult because I know the gift of his presence very well and what we did together, and what I'm so missing so really a lot is the continuous being together and talking. Our relationship was based on exploration topics. We watched something together and then we talked together, and co-creative dialogues and getting new ideas by what the other says. And so it was, a very intense, intellectual, I would say, but heart-based relationship. And also the physical was wonderful. He was so sweet, and he liked touching, and also this is missing, now my body is sort of alone in the world, and doesn't feel the physical contact anymore. And I'm still more in the I have lost period. And immediately after his death, first 2-3 weeks, I was strong and did everything, maybe 4 weeks. And then I entered into this fearful space. Oh, now I'm alone, and what will happen? And nobody will there for me when I will be dying, and hopefully I can make it. And I fell a little bit down into an abyss of Henrik, you said, of meaning. Now the life alone. Yeah, I can do that. I know that because I was alone before, but I sort of didn't want it. When I was alone before, I separated from partners because it didn't go on, and it was sort of my decision, but this one was absolutely not my decision that Mark should go. So on the other hand, being with him, especially in the last 3 months, I felt it as a gift, despite of the exhaustion, you say,
Mm-hmm.
with almost no sleep and really difficult. Always be there for him. So it was a gift. It sometimes doesn't feel like it, but I noticed that. And this I noticed also when accompanying my mother in the last weeks. It is like to live in a different reality. It's the only value is that now. Everything else is not so important, you know, and you calculate the time not anymore in years or months or weeks and even days, but the time goes from one moment to the other. So maybe it's what living in the now means in many ways. So I experienced that again, and I treasured it because this time I was more aware of what was going on inside of me and what was going on here. And I also treasured very much his trust in me and this relationship, which was even deeper in the last month in many ways. Also, sometimes I feared it would devour me. So I sort of had to be there completely, but also sometimes separate me energetically because I felt that I would be overwhelmed. Now I have overcome these first moments of, how do you say? You can say desperation, despite I never screamed and shouted or something. I cried, and I still cry almost every day when something happens that makes my heart overflow. But it is not as devastating anymore as it was sometimes when I didn't allow myself to go into this sort of nihilism and desperation. But I said, no, it's not meant that you do so, neither by him nor by the universe. And you need to go on, and you have some time, hopefully, to live and do something with your life. And I find myself now at this sort of a point where I like to do these shows, and I'm grateful that you helped me here or with coming to do this dying show. Also, the topic is certainly not very attractive for many people. I noticed that regular viewers from before don't show up, but it's clear people fear these topics, and also rationally, it's the only sure thing in our life. So rationally, it would be better to prepare, but I know also this tendency to avoid as long as possible. When you really meet it, then you cannot avoid anymore. So yeah, the shows, I did it with Mark. We created it together, and it was sort of a common enjoyment, and to interact between each other and talk with people. Doing it alone, I still like it, but it's different. So I have to figure out if it's that what I really want to do at the long run with the rest of my life, or if I will still do something else. I don't know. I'm waiting for intuitions of destiny, which goes its path and will lead me to what will be next. Yeah, I think that's what I can say. And I'm grateful that I could live these years with him, because he taught me a lot. I know that I taught him a lot too, but he certainly did, and I have now the chance to do it myself. He encouraged me, the first person in my life who encouraged me, and now I always, when I say that, then I begin to cry. And I hope that I can be encouraged myself now, alone. So thank you. Yeah. So I would invite you.
Heidi,
Yeah.
Heidi, can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Mhm.
Do you feel like when you have this show now, do you feel like you're honoring your life with the Mark that way?
Yes.
And the show has that purpose for you?
Yeah. Absolutely. I did it exactly for that, you know. The first session I had here the photo of us two, and then the cat came and threw the picture down and the glass was broken. So I didn't put it here anymore. But it's exactly that. It's honoring him. And I have created the book. It's in already as PDF. It's already there. It's not yet uploaded to iBook store to Apple Store because I have some tech difficulties. And everybody who wants to have that is, I will send it. So who is watching and is not yet subscribed for the wisdomfactory.net, please subscribe. I will send the links there for this book in honor of Mark. And, you know, I talk about stories which came to my mind. The book came slowly in several stories, and I created it in a feminine way, let's say. And also, fortunately, I had a lot of photos. So there will be a lot of photos and stories about him, about us, about the worldview we had, about Integral and the community, which was so important for Mark. He finally, with Integral people, he found his tribe, which he had never had before. And so you will, if you are interested, you will read, I think, heartfelt stories. They were written in this period now where I was cracked open, let's say. Yeah. So if you want to say some closing words, I'm very happy to receive them. I'm not for me, generally for the show and for your share and what you want to add.
Well, I'd just like to say that for anyone who's watching that is experiencing a loss, that there is so much richness that is available, that as you can accept and seek out what has become possible, that for me has been the way to create meaning out of a situation of emptiness. And it does take courage and it does take strength, but I think that allowing those things to be built into your life and into your heart is very beneficial in and of itself. So just from my heart to yours, whoever you might be, I just hold you in the light and know that love will find a way to touch you and lift you up.
Yeah. Light will lift us up and everybody who is in the same situation. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Heidi, for having this show, having the courage in this very tender time to come into the world and speak openly about your loss and about your discoveries. And
and you too, all of you, you know. Time heals maybe, but it will be with us the whole life. I'm quite sure about that. Henrik?
Yes, I'm also very grateful to sharing this moment with you, and that we can bring something to whoever is watching this, so it's more possible to support people maybe in that way. Yeah, for people who are going through or meeting death in one way or another, or just sickness. And it's been an honor, and I'm very grateful to share this with together with you, to hear your stories and to know what life and death is about more. And
Heidi, I'd like to share with you that Ken Wilber had planned with a wonderful woman named Lynn Dunbrack a big seminar in Denver on integral death and dying. They had no one sign up. And they had to, I signed up, but not one person signed up, and they had to cancel it.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
The only thing which is very you know, unavoidable in our lives, and we, unless it touches us directly, and even then, most people don't want to know about it. What is it? Magical thinking?
Yeah. If one does not, the word, going back in human history, the word creates, you know, if you go back to, you know, Genesis rather, the word creates. So if you touch the word death, it somehow creates the situation. So that magical thinking, if you don't deal with it, it will not happen. It will not touch you, even though consciously. And especially among the integral crowd, you know, I was really surprised, but even they were reluctant.
Yeah. I can share at the end a sort of opposite story. My mother, I remember her when I was 6. She was in her bed and had a psychological breakdown and something. And she always said, I will die soon. I will die soon. I don't need to buy new clothes and I will die soon. And I was desperate because I, you know, and she would get cancer and would die. And she didn't get cancer and died with almost 90 years. So when I asked her, why did you do that? She said, when I say that, I hope it will be avoided. So she had the exactly opposite idea, that when she says it, then it wouldn't come to her, you know.
Yeah.
But,
thank you, Heidi. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I thank you very, very, very much. And let's stay in contact. Okay?
Please.
Thank you.
I'm honored.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Honored.